I've seen people in our own company who were, whoa, AI, whoa, who now
Yeah.
you think they would have invented AI because they're
Yeah.
really embracing it and they're starting to see what it can do.
Welcome back to Short Views for anyone who's joined us before. And if this is your first time hopping on, welcome. I'm Katie McMichael, Executive Director of Movers for America. And today we are joined by the legend, Mike Brannigan, President and CEO of Suddath. And they are one of the largest moving companies in the world. Particularly to what we're talking about today, they have been doing military moves for 75 years. So they have seen all the iterations of the program, of just everything in this industry. So I'm really excited to have Mike's take today on industry innovations. This is something that's been at the forefront for a couple years now. And Mike is uniquely qualified to talk about where we're going with that. So, Mike, thank you for joining us today.
Thank you. Thank you for calling me a legend. That's normally not what they say about me inside the company. So thank you, Katie.
Well, so to kick us off, I would really love to kind of, what is your view of the role of technology in any PCS program, right?
Yeah, I think that's a good question. And I think in this case, we're talking about sort of the customer experience and the service member experience. That technology is certainly available and to facilitate the exchange of information, to gather information, to offer omni-channel forms of communication because everybody likes to receive communication a little differently, to
Right.
provide status updates as to shipments. So people obviously want to know where their things are or what the current status is and so
Yes.
forth, or who's coming to do my move and things like that. So I think of the program goals, having some kind of technology interface similar to what a service member would expect, whether they're traveling, whether they're working through a retail or whatever it happens to be. Most industries have that, and I think it's a reasonable expectation and a worthwhile program goal. Having that type of technology, that kind of digital access to information is going to be more and more important for the service member experience going forward.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I agree. One thing that was talked about a lot during GHC was we can implement these new technologies into the program, right? We can have someone come in and do all these things that we want to do. So, I mean, in your experience, do you think there's other options to be able to achieve this kind of technology adoption for
Yeah.
customers?
Yeah, that's a very interesting question. I think you had one move manager who was going to provide one common digital experience. There's certainly some goodness to that. The services that support each of the service members, they would know what that experience is going to be like, have a chance to opine on that, and there would be significant consistency. So clearly there was some benefits for that. Having said that, I think a couple of things that I want to point out there. I think at certain levels of Transcom and maybe certain levels of services, there was some expectation that this app or this digital interface was going to solve a lot of the world's problems with their respect to moving. And that's only one part of the problem. Having a good digital mobile platform is not going to solve base access. It's not going to solve that a very high percentage of people move in a 60-day period. It's an important tool in the toolkit, but in and of itself, it's not the panacea that's going to solve the challenges that exist in the military moving world. So I think there's a balance of all that. In the sense that, today, in our moving business, and as you mentioned, we're one of the largest moving companies in the world. We use very similar technologies to provide similar type of customer portals and information access in our logistics company, in our commercial moving company, in our relocation company, and so forth. So these technologies do exist. And, there are restrictions on our ability to do that today. But if Transcom were to go to a derivative of today's program and say, as a requirement, as a move manager, as a TSP, you have to deliver this. This is what we want to see in terms of a customer portal, of a mobile platform that provides this access. We could certainly do that. There's nothing that would prevent us with a little bit of lead time and some clarity around what the requirements are from an experience perspective, from a security perspective, and so forth. Certainly very achievable for that to be offered in the existing program.
Sure. No, that makes a lot of sense. Do you think it would be confusing for service members if they had to go to a different app or interface versus where there would be a single app?
If you're traveling on American Airlines versus Delta Airlines, or you're shopping at Walmart.com or Amazon, you're used to different experiences and you adapt, right? You adapt. So as long as the interface, the customer portal is easy to use, it meets all the requirements that Transcom will be looking for, I think service members, like consumers in general, have the ability to flex and will adapt, and it will be incumbent upon us as a provider and others in the industry to provide an easy to use, intuitive app that minimizes the kind of the lost synergies of not having one single technical interface.
Yeah, because I think about when I travel, like your American Airlines example. I mean, I have my Delta app, I have an app for my hotel, and it really is all pretty seamless. And in some cases, it's actually easier to have their own separate apps because then I know who I'm dealing with if I have issues on one end versus the other. So beyond kind of the customer portals, right? Because the customer facing part is just one part of the moving experience. What else do you see happening in terms of the technology that is supporting the military moving program?
I think some of the advances and the willingness of the industry to adapt and evolve, I think it's picking up in an accelerating pace. I see it too. I'm in a little bit of a unique position too because we have one of the largest move management companies in the world, as you pointed out. So I have that perspective of both the move manager and the moving company, the asset-based service provider. So this is an interesting question too because it does get it a little bit into the role of the move manager. And this has been an interesting topic, but particularly as new programs are being weighed. And the question you're asking on the technology side is one, I think, really important example of that. So probably about 5, 6, 7 years ago, we realized that we needed to be more available. We needed to be more accessible. We needed to provide more information to service members. We needed to be able to be reached 24/7, if you will. So we've made investments in some advanced call center technology, customer service technology that allows us to be more accessible, to make those investments in the service member experience that is hard for each individual TSP to make. Because we can make these investments in these larger scale, more sophisticated communication platforms that allow for the multiple forms of communication, that allow for us to do things like drive our call answer rates up into the upper 90 percentile range and to be able to move people along. And I think we've seen as an industry, and certainly in our company too, I think we've seen those quality scores and a lot of the leading metrics become much more competitive and perform at a much higher rate over the last 5, 6, 7 years. So that's an example, just one example of what a move manager would invest in is that technology. The other is capacity, because as you know, capacity is a scarce commodity.
Yes, it
Quality capacity is an even more scarce commodity. So we've made a lot of investments over the years in proprietary technology that allow us to do a couple of things, to really have access to the technology, to aggregate capacity. As orders are dropped from the military, we can seamlessly push those orders out in the supply chain almost instantaneously to the highest quality service providers so that we know that we can lock in dates, meet the RDDs and things like that with the best available capacity. And that's very efficient because now we're marrying supply and demand much more efficiently to the right sources. It allows our people to spend more time on solving the customer problems as opposed to finding a home for the shipment. So, and you have to have a lot of logic in that to make sure you're routing shipments to the right people who are performing and so forth. So integral to that is our vendor management platform where we look at all the scores. There's BI tools and stuff that our teams have invested in and use that allow us to do that. So, a lot of investment in technology from the move management side that allows, again, for the quality, for higher on-time deliveries, lower claims, all those types of things that are critical.
Yeah, no, that's great. Last question, what do you see on the horizon? I mean, AI is a buzzword that's flying around. Every industry is trying to figure out how to adopt this new technology. For the moving industry, do you think this is a real option or a myth? Is it something that we can find ways to utilize to, streamline efficiencies and improve customer satisfaction?
That's a good question, and I'll tell you, for me, it was probably myth for a while. And I'll tell you, we've had an AI steering committee in our company for probably 12 or 24 months. But I'll be the first to acknowledge that I would say it was more defensive It was how do we prevent bad things from happening to us? How do we prevent somebody in our company from using Chat GPT on a Google search and our data or PII being sucked out into the dark web and so
Right.
forth? So a
Yeah.
lot of our AI charter, if I were to show it to you today, was about governance and firewalls and data protection. And that was logical. But what I'll tell you is that internally, we are really flipping that, and we'll have 5 key principles in our AI strategy, and data governance and data protection will be one of them. The rest are more, I would say, offensive. And I think what we've learned is that a lot of the applications we use, like our call center technologies, they're integrating AI into their platforms. So how do we leverage what they're doing and what we're doing to make an even more seamless customer experience, to improve how quickly and how easily we can communicate with the transferees. Not so much in the military yet, but in other parts of our business, we use an AI agent for our call center. So now instead of answering 76.2% of our calls, we're answering 100% of our calls. And that's done with an AI agent, and that's facilitating, again, being accessible, being able to provide information. We're testing other AI agents for how to have that initial customer experience for data gathering. I've seen a lot of evolution here. I've seen people in our own company who were, whoa, AI, whoa, who now
Yeah.
you think they would have invented AI because they're really embracing it, and they're starting to see what it can do and how it can transform the way we work, how we can create a better customer experience, but equally importantly, how can we take our most important asset, our people, and deploy them in a way where their time is used to solve problems and to be available in those moments of truth, and use AI, use RPA and BP and these other associated tools to do a lot of the automation, the behind the scenes, the routine things that can be done that meets the customer where they are. So I think it's changing. I think it's changing more rapidly maybe than some of us feel comfortable with at times, but I think it's going to offer a lot of opportunities in the commercial and residential side of our business. So a lot of advancements coming to this industry, probably more in the next 24 months than the last 5 or 10 years combined. So it's kind of exciting, it's kind of scary, but I do think there are a lot of applications for AI for those willing to make the investments, train your people, and be more on the front end of this.
Wow, that's great. So before we hop off today, do you have kind of any last thoughts on technology that you kind of want to leave us with?
No, I just think in our company, one of the most important things for us is making sure that we create an innovation culture. We're never going to replace that human intervention. This is a very personal business, as you know, Katie. We're in
Yes.
people's homes, we're moving their things, it's very stressful. We'll never replace, and we should never replace that human intervention. Nothing can replace the people-to-people contact, but we can use automation smartly to augment that, to make sure we're more effective. And then our goal is to improve the customer experience, whether that's a residential customer, a corporate customer, or very importantly, a service member who's moving every 2 to 3 years in service of the country. So I think changing the culture, changing innovation, be willing to adapt are really important variables for any company as we move through this journey.
Great. Well, thank you so much for joining us today. This was, I feel like we all learned a lot, and it's so good to have the technology conversation.
Yeah.
And it's exciting. I think it's exciting to see what the moving industry is going to be able to do in the future.
Thanks for the time, and happy to share some thoughts.
Great. All right. Well, thank you everybody for joining us, and thank you, Mike, for hopping on today.
Thanks, Katie.